Did you know that nearly 10% of the world's trade passes through the Suez Canal every year? This narrow waterway in Egypt holds immense strategic value, linking the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea, and in 1956 its control became a global flashpoint that changed the course of history. In the summer of 1956, the world witnessed one of the most significant geopolitical crises of the 20th century, the Suez Crisis. This crisis wasn't just about the ownership of a vital waterway, it was a defining moment in the early stages of the Cold War. The crisis highlighted the shifting dynamics of international power as a colonial Europe faced off against the emerging superpower of the United States, with Egypt caught in the middle. The Suez Crisis became an unprecedented test of global diplomacy and military intervention, challenging old imperialist traditions and reshaping the Middle East and beyond. But what exactly happened, and why did this event become so pivotal in international relations? At the heart of the Suez Crisis was Egypt's nationalization of the Suez Canal, an action taken by the Egyptian president Gamal Abdel Nasser. The canal had been a vital passage for trade, especially oil shipments, and had been under British and French control since its construction in the 19th century. Nasser's move was not just a strategic act, it was a declaration of independence and defiance against Western imperialism. In response, Britain, France and Israel formed a tripartite alliance to militarily intervene, aiming to regain control of the canal and remove Nasser from power. But what started as a military operation would quickly escalate into a full-blown international crisis. The events leading up to the Suez Crisis were rooted in the complex political dynamics of the Middle East and the Cold War. The United Kingdom and France had long been dominant powers in the region, and the Suez Canal was essential to their interest. However, by the mid-20th century, the dynamics had shifted. Egypt, under Nasser, was growing increasingly influential in the Arab world, and the United States had emerged as the dominant global superpower. Several factors contributed to the crisis. Nasser's rise to power. Nasser had positioned himself as a champion of Arab nationalism and anti-colonialism, advocating for the removal of Western influence in the Middle East. He had already taken steps to modernize Egypt and assert its sovereignty, including his decision to nationalize the Suez Canal in 1956, after Britain and the US withdrew their funding for the construction of the High Dam at Aswan, a massive development project that Nasser had envisioned. British and French interests. Britain and France were alarmed by Nasser's growing power and his potential to inspire anti-colonial movements across the region. Moreover, the canal was a vital trade route for oil, and its nationalization threatened European economies, which were heavily reliant on Middle Eastern oil. The Israeli factor, Israel, which had been in conflict with Egypt since its establishment in 1948, saw Nasser as a direct threat. The Egyptian leader had called for the destruction of Israel and had blockaded the Straits of Tiran, cutting off Israeli access to the Red Sea. For Israel, military action seemed like a necessary step to protect its existence. Cold War rivalry. At the same time, the Cold War rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union was intensifying. The US had no desire to see the region fall under Soviet influence, but it was also concerned about the actions of its European allies. The Soviet Union, for its part, expressed strong support for Nasser and warned the West against intervening in Egypt. The tipping point came on October 29, 1956, when Israel launched Operation Kadesh, an invasion of the Sinai Peninsula, aiming to secure the Suez Canal and overthrow Nasser. In response, Britain and France began bombing Egyptian positions and initiated a seaborne invasion. However, this military action quickly led to unexpected consequences. The United States, led by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, was shocked by the swift military response and by the apparent lack of consultation with Washington. The US, eager to maintain influence in the region and deter Soviet involvement, put immense pressure on its allies to cease their operations. At the same time, the Soviet Union, led by Nikita Khrushchev, condemned the attack and threatened to intervene, further escalating tensions on the global stage. In an unprecedented move, the United Nations intervened, calling for an immediate ceasefire and the establishment of a peacekeeping force to stabilize the region. Under intense diplomatic pressure, Britain, France and Israel were forced to accept a ceasefire by November 6, 1956, marking the collapse of their military campaign. The Suez Crisis had profound long-term effects on the Middle East and global politics. First and foremost, it marked the decline of British and French influence in the region. The United States emerged as the leading global superpower, demonstrating its ability to influence international conflicts, while the Soviet Union also solidified its role as a key global player. The crisis also highlighted the limitations of military force in achieving geopolitical goals and marked the first large-scale intervention by the United Nations to restore peace. In the Middle East, the Suez Crisis served to bolster Nasser's popularity and positioned Egypt as a leader of the Arab world. Nasser was able to emerge from the conflict unscathed and continued to advocate for pan-Arab unity. The fallout from the crisis, however, would fuel continued tensions in the region, laying the groundwork for future conflicts. For global politics, the Suez Crisis signaled a new world order, where the era of Western colonial dominance was ending, and the United States and Soviet Union became the central figures in shaping international relations. It also revealed the increasing importance of the United Nations as a forum for global diplomacy. What are your thoughts on the Suez Crisis and its lasting impact on the Middle East and global power dynamics? Do you think this event marked the true end of European imperialism in the region? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more about the Cold War and how it shaped the world, make sure to check out our next video on the key events of the Cold War.